Hello and welcome once again to our Ourdadsstamps video. For today's video I thought we'd talk about the stamps of the Bahamas. The Bahamas is situated in the West Indies just north of Cuba and was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. They began using postage stamps in 1858, and like a lot of Commonwealth countries, they initially used British stamps with a local postmark, and that was A05. Now those stamps, if you can get hold of them, are actually quite valuable. They used a penny, twopence, fourpence, sixpence and 1 shilling British stamps, and apart from the fourpenny and sixpenny one, the rest are catalogued at, in some cases, several £1,000s. So they're very difficult to get hold of. I found this one on a penny, or a pair of penny reds on eBay, and it was for sale at £750, which sounds a bargain. The catalogue value is £5,000 for these two stamps, but I think I'd be a bit worried about spending £750 on eBay on a stamp that I haven't actually seen. Now, as far as I can work out, this is a reputable dealer and it's a bona fide stamps, but I'm not sure I'd pay that much without having some sort of certificate. However, they look nice. The postmark is a little bit faint in places, but it looks genuine enough. And as I said, most of these are very valuable. The fourpenny and sixpenny one, you're looking at about £400, £500 catalogue value. But the others are well over 1,000. So look through your English stamps, and if you can find some of these, you're onto a good thing. The reason why the penny stamp is worth a lot more than the others is that a year later, the Bahamas produced their own stamp for 1 penny, which was only used for inter-island post. But that really did away with the use of the British penny stamp in the Bahamas, so they are quite difficult to get hold of and quite rare. The 1 penny stamp issued by the Bahamas in 1859 shows the words inter-insular postage on the top of an image of Queen Victoria. This was to signify that it could only be used inter-islands and was only used for local post. At that time they were still using British stamps for foreign mail. But by the 1860s they had produced a new set of stamps which included fourpenny and sixpenny values. Fourpence was the going rate to send post to the USA, and sixpence was the rate to send postage to Great Britain. So those were fairly much in demand. And they later introduced a 1 shilling stamp as well. In 1884, a new set of stamps was issued, which features the standard Queen Victoria profile of the time. And the same design can be seen on a lot of different countries at that time. These ranged in face value from 1 penny up to £1. Now, I can't imagine what a £1 stamp was used for in the Bahamas at that time, but they certainly issued one, and as you would expect, these are quite valuable and would cost you several £100s to get hold of one. The others in that set are more reasonably priced, and without spending a fortune you can certainly get up to the 1 shilling value. In 1901, Bahamas became one of the first Commonwealth countries to issue a pictorial stamp, and this was an image of the Queen's Staircase in Nassau. It was produced in 4 different values: a penny, 5pence, 2 shillings and 3 shillings. And it's quite an attractive stamp and quite a good looking set. It's actually easier to get hold of mint than it is used. The catalogue value of mint is round about £90, whereas used it's £170. So it's one to look out for faked cancellations. I'm not aware of this being a common problem, but where the difference in value is such an amount, I would imagine that does happen. In 1915, the Bahamas came up with a strange agreement with Canada, where the two countries arranged special delivery services. Now, I'm not quite sure whether this was a regular route between Bahamas and Canada and why there would be a need for it, but they actually exchanged stamps, so you could buy the Bahamas stamp in Canada and presumably the Canadian stamp in Bahamas. And the Bahamas stamp was overprinted with the word special delivery, and it was on the 5p stamp only. On its own, it's not exceptionally valuable, but there are lots of variations with the overprint. Sometimes it's printed double, sometimes it's inverted, sometimes it's a combination of both. And these are very, very valuable. So have a look out for them. But once again, be wary that there could well be some forgeries out there. It's quite an easy thing to forge. So just be careful before spending a lot of money. Like most Commonwealth countries, there was the usual definitive sets for Edward VII and George V, but some nicer ones to look out for. In 1920, they produced a nice set in celebration of peace after the First World War. And this features a picture of King George V, the Bahamas crest of a ship. There were 5 values ranging from a halfpenny up to a shilling. Not particularly expensive to buy, but it does look quite a nice set. And 10 years later, in 1930, they issued a set commemorating the tercentenary of the colony. And once again, there are 5 values, this time from 1 penny up to 3 shillings. And this is quite a nice looking set as well, with a large image of the seal of the Bahamas in the middle and the dates of the tercentenary, 1629 to 1929, along the top. A very similar stamp was issued the following year, but without the dates on the top, for a 2 shilling and 3 shilling value. So there are 2 different types of this. The ones that are more valuable are the ones with the dates along the top. So keep a lookout for those. When King George VI came to the throne, they issued a set with just a portrait image of the king. And these run from a halfpenny up to a shilling. They later produced a few stamps, just 3 stamps in pictorial format for 4p, 6p and 8p. And then in 1942, all these stamps were overprinted with the words 1492 Landfall of Columbus 1942 to commemorate the 450th anniversary of the landing of Christopher Columbus. A full pictorial set of King George VI stamps was issued in 1948, and these look very nice as a complete set. Again, it runs from a halfpenny up to £1 and shows various images of life and features of the Bahamas, each one in a single colour, but it does look quite effective when displayed as a complete set. When Queen Elizabeth came to the throne, they used the same images for a pictorial set featuring her portrait, but these were in 2 colours, which make them look quite different from the George VI set, even though the images are the same. These are easy to get hold of used and not particularly valuable at all. In mint format, they're catalogued at about £100, so you probably would be able to pick those up quite easily. And then in 1965, they issued another pictorial set for Queen Elizabeth. And these are quite different from many other stamps. There's no frame on them, so they have a white background, which sort of blends into the stamp. I think it's quite effective. And they also have a full head and shoulders image of the Queen on the right-hand side. So they are quite different from a lot of other stamps that were issued at the time. And I think they're quite effective. And once again, not expensive to buy mint or used, so these could be quite a good starting point for a Bahamas collection. This particular set was actually overprinted a year later in 1966 when they changed to decimal currency, and each of the values was overprinted with the decimal equivalent. And then a year after that, the same basic set was reissued in decimal currency, with just a few extra designs and a change in some of the colours. So with similar sort of designs and images, you can actually collect 3 different sets, and none of the sets are expensive at all. Definitely one worth looking at, and could well be worth investing a bit of money to get some 3 very nice looking sets of stamps. In 1968, they experimented with different designs and shapes, and they produced a set of stamps in a what has been called a boomerang-shaped design, depicting gold coins to commemorate the first general election under new constitution. To me, they're gimmicky stamps and they're more labels than actual stamps. And I'm not particularly fond of this type of stamp, but it's the only time they did it. So they can be forgiven, I suppose, for trying it once. There were lots of nice looking stamps produced in the 60s and 70s from the Bahamas. Many of them advertising tourism and showing different scenes and different features of the Bahamas that would appeal to tourists. They also started producing mini sheets of these sets as well, so there's a lot that can be collected and a lot that looks quite good in my view. In 1971, a new pictorial design was produced for the definitive set, which runs from 1 cent up to $3. Again, not a particularly expensive set to buy. And this is another set, though, that is more valuable used than it is mint. So once again, be wary of forged postmarks. The same set was reissued in 1976 with a different watermark. So if you're going to collect these, you can actually get 2 different sets by just checking the watermarks, and there's not a lot of difference in value between them, but it's definitely a different set, so it may be something to look at. On the new set, there are a few values that aren't on the original set, so you'll be able to tell which ones they are, but not necessarily unless you look for the watermarks. The others look very similar. In 1973, the Bahamas became independent and produced a set of stamps and mini sheets to commemorate this. Throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s and so on, they produced a lot of nice looking sets and a lot of nice stamps. Many of them featuring the flora and fauna of the islands, and in particular birds feature quite often in these sets. There was a nice set in 1991 with a variety of birds on a plain cream background, but I particularly like the set from 2001, which features a nice image of the bird and also of the bird's eggs. That set runs from 5 cents up to $10. It's catalogued at between £40–50, so you should be able to pick those up fairly reasonably. One nice thing about the Bahamas Postal Authority is that they haven't really gone overboard with producing commemoratives. They produce about 6 or 7 sets per year, which is a lot more than it used to be, but is nowhere near as many as some other countries are doing these days. So they are to be applauded for that. They also seem to be releasing a pictorial definitive set about every 5 or 6 years. And as I've said in previous videos, I do like collecting sets of stamps where the basic design is the same, but just with different images and different values. For me, it just looks nice when they're all together and displayed on a page. And this is one thing they've done on a fairly regular basis by the looks of it, about every 5 or 6 years. So you can build up quite a nice looking collection of just the definitive sets. The Queen and royalty still feature frequently on the Bahamian stamps, and earlier this year they produced a set commemorating the coronation of King Charles III, as well as a mini sheet featuring a $2 stamp of King Charles in all his coronation regalia. There are also various different sets featuring flowers, and also, as you would expect for an island, there's also several sets about ships and boats, all quite nice looking and well worth collecting. So overall, I think there's quite a lot in the Bahamas stamps that are well worth collecting, and particularly with the later issues from Queen Elizabeth onwards, then most of them are very affordable and quite easy to get hold of. So if you're thinking of starting a new collection, this may well be one of the islands worth considering. So I hope that's given you a flavour of the stamps of the Bahamas, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. 2 weeks' time will be Christmas, so I should be taking a break for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back with some new videos and new countries in the new year. So Feliz Navidad a todos, and I hope the new year brings you exciting adventures in stamp collecting. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. Don't forget you can visit my online stores at eBay and Delcamp under the name of Ourdadsstamps, where I have over 2,000 items for sale.